Well, hey, Southern Oregon, welcome back to the Real Estate Show. We're so happy to have you. Today, I'm Alice Lema. I'm a broker at John L. Scott here in Southern Oregon and your host of the show. And today, we're so excited. We have two super interesting people. We have Bradley Clark, the Community Development Director, City of Grants Pass, and Donna Rupp, the Associate Planner, City of Grants Pass. And we're going to talk more about flooding in the city limits. We're going to talk about the Rogue River, real estate, and some of the creek systems in Josephine County. It's going to be super, super interesting. So please stay tuned for that. In the meantime, we are going to check our local statistics in all three counties, just like we do every week. And we've got some changes happening in our local housing market. So let's start with Jackson County first. Jackson County year over year. Residential prices are up 1%. The average single family home now costing you $437,600. The number of solds in Jackson County this week were up 47% from last year. 31 residential closings on SOMLS. The number of listings in Jackson County down 3%. Year over year, we had 550 active listings on SOMLS this week in Jackson County. Josephine County is our star of the week. It had year over year prices up 13%. The average single family home in Josephine County this week costing $386,635. Josephine County also had an uptick year over year in the number of solds. We were up 8% with 13 closings in the single family home market on SOMLS in Josephine County. Additionally, Josephine County had a 1% increase in number of listings year over year this week. So we've got 258 active listings on SOMLS in Josephine County. So Josephine County had all three criteria up this week. Congratulations. Klamath County is next. Klamath County prices year over year were down 3% in the residential market. The average single family home in Klamath County costing $349,676 this week. Number of sold year over year this week in Klamath County were down 25%. There were 9 residential closings on SOMLS in Klamath County this week. The number of listings in Klamath County were down 14% year over year. This week, there were 197 active residential properties on SOMLS in Klamath County this week. So Klamath County, all three categories were down. Josephine County, all three categories were up. And Jackson County had prices up and number sold up and number of listings down. So we are every week checking this because we want to track what's happening. We want to help you be good consumers in the real estate market. And we also want to start noticing the micro trends because that leads to macro trends. And it's all about watching the data. So once again, I'm going to make a plea for people to put their homes on the market if they can. And if you're out buying, keep at it. It looks like the market might just become a little more stable. Right now, let's check in with Brad Clark and Donna Rupp. Well, welcome, Brad and Donna. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
This is really exciting. The city of Grants Pass is one of the most beautiful parts of Oregon, and in part because of all the waterways. And today we're really excited to get some information about flood zone and how that affects the city of Grants Pass and also how it affects home ownership and renters.
Okay. Sounds good.
So again, thank you for being on the show. Let's start with what is the flood zone or the floodway, just so people kind of know what we're talking about, because it's a little bit technical.
Yeah, well, we're gonna just kind of tag team this, I think, a little bit here today.
Perfect.
Yeah, well, this is not unique to Grants Pass. When we're talking about floodplains and floodways, these are terms that are used throughout the country.
Mhm.
And it really became, more of a common regulation, shall we say, in about 1968 when the federal government formed the National Flood Insurance Program. So some
Mhm.
folks might be familiar with, the NFIP, National Flood Insurance Program. That's kind of a division of FEMA, and they have set, regulations for how you determine exactly where are these things called floodplains and floodways. And um, the one way to think about it is the 1% chance of getting flooded every
in any given year.
in any given year. But another way to think about it is that it's actually a 26% chance of being flooded during any normal mortgage. So
Oh, that is a good way to
a
think of
30-year
it.
mortgage, you actually have a 26% chance. If you have property that's in a special flood hazard area, which is just another way to think of the floodplains. But yeah, there's good graphics, as we talked about before the podcast, on both our website as well as on FEMA's website, that really kind of help define what that is. But you have a channel of rivers, and flooding, of course, happens next to lakes and next to the ocean as well. But for Grants Pass, I mean, we're primarily dealing with riverine flooding. But in a riverine situation, you have the flood channel, or the channel that the water runs into, and then you have, a flood plain where the kind of initial inundation of waters could be, and then there's a 500-year floodplain. So I don't know if you have more information.
Well, a lot of people think, oh, it's 100-year flood. That's what it used to be called, that area right next to the river. And as Brad said, technically it's actually a 1% chance of occurring in any given year. So you could have back to back 100-year floods, but it's not
that's
100
interesting.
years. So
Mhm.
it's a common terminology that was used for a long time. And it's still there, but FEMA helps to define it better. And then also where the river flows is the floodway, which is highly restricted as far as any activity within it. Grants Pass does have several properties along the Rogue River that have property within the floodway. And property owners are encouraged, or oftentimes required, to contact the city before they do anything there, including vegetation removal. Yeah, so it's not just building, but the problem is people get down there and they pull out a bunch of stuff. Well, that leads to erosion. And a lot of dirt will wash off into the river, and that creates problems for many different areas. So, there's a lot going on. And we also have like Gilbert Creek. Beyond the Rogue River, we have a couple of good sized creeks within the city that flood. And we have some localized flooding sometimes on streets and low spots that haven't been addressed yet.
Yeah, which is a good point, because flooding, people often think, well, I don't live right next to it, so I'll never flood. But if you look at a floodplain map, it can kind of be a eye-opening as far as how much property away from the river could actually be in a floodplain. So,
and why would that be?
Well, it's really all about
elevation.
It's water likes to go downhill.
It takes a path of least resistance. So, our floodplain at Grants Pass is really kind of strange the way it goes away from the river, and it's because the elevation drops. And so if that water gets over a bank, it's going to go to where it's lowest. And that's in Grants Pass especially, that's not right next to the river after it initially breaks the bank.
That is very interesting.
Yeah.
And there's just one other point on this is that a lot of people ask, well, how did you come up with these lines?
I bet they do.
Yeah.
This is, did you just sit down and with your Crayolas and start, marking these or what?
You specifically, Brad.
Yeah. No, and these are built on what's called FIS's flood insurance studies. And a flood insurance study is built on a very technical model that engineers that specialize in flooding come up with, and they run these. They call them various softwares, but HECRAS is one, and there's other types of software that they go and they take survey elevations, cross sections, and it's a very, very detailed science in terms of identifying where exactly the boundary should be drawn. So is it perfect? No. FEMA knows that, and they've set up a whole system of how you could challenge where that is, as well as cities can submit applications to amend the floodplain maps as well. So,
and the most recent one for Grants Pass was conducted in 2009.
Wow, that's pretty recent. Yeah. So we are going to have to take a quick break here, but definitely want to talk more about the technical parts of the floodplain and the flood map and how homeowners can change that, because I think that's a very uplifting part of the conversation. We're going to be right back after a quick word from our sponsors, talking to Bradley Clark and Donna Rupp, the city of Grants Pass. Don't go away. We got a great show. Well, hey, Southern Oregon, welcome back to the Real Estate Show. I'm Alice Lema, your host of the show, and we get to talk to Bradley Clark and Donna Rupp on Grants Pass, and we're talking about water and flooding. So thanks again, Brad and Donna, for being on the show.
Sure.
Absolutely.
So before the break, we were talking about kind of the technical definition of floodways and floodplains. And we had just started talking about people going down on their property and pulling up vegetation and things like that. And so you mentioned erosion, but I think a lot of people don't know who actually owns the water and the waterway.
So the river
in
is
Oregon.
it's the state of Oregon, the actual
State of Oregon.
river
Mhm.
itself, the waterway, the floodway. So people who own property along the Rogue River think that, well, it's kind of complicated, but the intent is to protect the river habitat for all of the animals that live there, and then also they're protecting their own property by leaving vegetation along their edge of their property, because it stops the erosion. The roots from the plants hold the water in place. And that's a real simplified version of what is called a riparian area. That means the area immediately adjacent to the river itself is a riparian area. And on Gilbert Creek, there's a 20-foot setback that you can't build within 20 feet of the creek. And so we have quite a bit of information on grantspassoregon.gov. That's all spelled out, and it's .gov. Some people type in .com and say, you told me.
We all do that automatically.
Yeah. So if you just type in flood management on our website search, you'll come right to the page that has lots of information on that. And also in our development code, Article 13 has all of the restrictions and what to do in the floodway and what can. There's a lot of building code around it as well. So we have a lot of information available to people. And if they can't find it, they can always call community development and ask, or come into the office.
I think a lot of homeowners are surprised that they don't own that. and they're going down the bank to make a picnic spot, or they want to put in a dock or something like that. And I don't know that that's allowed, is it? Putting on a boat dock?
Well, that's typically going to be considered development and in the floodway.
Mm-hmm.
The floodway is sort of that channel where the main water elevation is contained. It's only after you hit a flood that it comes out of the channel. So if you're working within the channel, and that's called the floodway, there's more restrictive rules than there are in the floodplain. And one of those rules is deals with having to basically demonstrate that there's a no rise. So whatever you do in the floodway will not cause a rise to the water elevation. That can be extremely difficult to demonstrate that what you're doing is a no rise. I do think it's important to point out that with both floodway and floodplain development, it doesn't mean you can't do anything. The reason why there are rules there is to still allow some level of development, but the whole point of what these regulations do is to have that be done safely, and that you're not impacting your neighbors downstream.
Yeah. And the city has a floodplain development permit process. So a floodplain development permit would be required.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
And that's through the community development department as well.
Okay. And there's probably information on your website about that?
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Because people are so excited when they get their, dream house on the river, and then they find out they have to be more careful, because those aren't weeds, those are habitat.
Right, exactly. Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So could we talk a little bit about the process of the permitting and kind of what the permit do you have some specific questions that you ask people? Is there an inspection? Is there somebody from the city that goes out and looks at your property to see what you're doing is going to be okay?
We can, yes. Yeah, we can. Typically they start by contacting us and explaining what's going on, because there are so many different variables associated with different properties. It's hard to generalize for this show, but if anybody's thinking of doing anything, we're always available to answer questions and guide them in the right direction. So, if somebody says, hey, I want to plant some stuff down there and it's, native plants, we're all for it. We work closely with the the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. Sorry about that. With ODFW.
Wow. You've got a lot of coordinating.
Yeah, we have a really good relationship with them when homeowners are like, well, what could I plant down here and what's best for the habitat? And if there are concerns over migratory animals or, bird habitat, whatever, we work closely with them. So I can't give you a generalized answer. It's really case by case. But, yeah.
And on the structural side, that will require almost always, some kind of engineered drawing or a drawing prepared by an architect. And then our development permit also involves what's called an elevation certificate. So, for you in real estate, that's probably not an uncommon term. If you're in a flood area, these elevation certificates are usually required by an insurance company if you're doing, getting flood insurance, and that needs to involve a land surveyor. So, it's not cheap to do this kind of development, because the whole point is to basically prove to show through your drawings that what you're constructing is not going to be lifted up in a flood event and taken downstream,
Mhm.
or cause excessive damage, to your property.
Mhm.
Infrastructure downstream.
Or infrastructure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in order for that permit to really, have any meaning, it needs to be backed up by documentation like an engineer drawing or, an architectural
Right.
drawing. So,
And the actual buildings, we do have buildings go in the 100-year floodplain on a regular basis, and they just have to meet a slightly different criteria as far as how high the foundation is, and flood vents in the foundation, and mechanical equipment has to be raised to a certain level. And all of that requires elevation certificates by surveyors as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's doable. It just takes more work than typical.
So people, homeowners should give themselves a pretty good timeline to go through all of the research and get all of the approvals, or at least the opinion of the city before doing things.
Before
it's
investing.
certainly recommended, and working with their the design professionals, or
But if you're not going to be able to build anything anyway in that 20-foot setback, then is this more for vegetation alteration, or creating a like your own recreation area, like a little beach or something? Is that pretty much what people are trying to do?
Well,
not necessarily.
Not always, no.
Because like we talked about earlier, the 100-year floodplain, which is where all these rules apply in, can be pretty wide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's not just that 20 feet off of the top of bank. So so that's where it's always good to first and foremost come in and or go online, because there's really good mapping online where you can just type in your address.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then it'll just pull up the map, and it'll show you where that 100-year line is, and then you'll know is what you want to build inside or outside of the floodplain.
Unfortunately, there are people who start to do a project and then stop and then come in. And there's some old structures in Grants Pass that were built, in the 40s and 50s, and before, NFIP, before flood insurance, and they were actually in the floodway. We had one a few years ago where they tore down the old house and then wanted to come in and build a new one, and it's in the floodway. And we're like, well, you have to do an engineering study, provide us with what's called the no rise analysis, and show that your structure won't impact anyone downstream. Oftentimes,
and Donna, we're going to have to take a quick break. Hold that thought. Nope.
Hold that thought.
You're all great. We're going to continue after a word from our sponsors. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Real Estate Show. Donna and Brad from the City of Grants Pass are with us, and we're talking about floodwaters. And Donna, let's let you finish your thought, because that was a good point you were making before the break.
So what I was saying is that they came in after they tore down the old house and wanted to build a new one, and they hadn't realized that their property was in the floodway, and they had to do the no rise analysis, as well as a new house to meet the no rise analysis would have had to have been elevated quite high with automatic flood vents, and wouldn't be able to have.
So like up high on a retainer
on a high foundation.
High
foundation. And then also have to have their mechanical equipment up there, and you can't have your toilet down there because there's nowhere the sewer. So all sorts of requirements. In the end, they ended up with the blank lot on the river, and they haven't done anything with it.
Oh, okay, that's
because they didn't do their due diligence.
Well, and it's kind of interesting that that's not required by the state of Oregon, at least, or the counties at this point. When you're doing a real estate transaction, you really have to rely on yourself and your agent, and if you have an attorney or a surveyor, to get that information, because in the old days, you did anything you wanted.
Right, exactly.
So how does that work if you have old septics, that were like grandfathered in, old wells, old septics, but they're still working and they're still
Yeah.
being used by a homeowner? What do we do with those?
So septics, they have to be removed.
Do they?
Basically, we want everybody.
Uh-huh.
Well,
Right?
yeah, at the time of development.
At
I
the
mean,
time of development.
not existing ones.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Sorry.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, but you're right that there's some pretty startling information about what they call pre-firm and post-firm data. The firm meaning the flood insurance rate maps.
Mhm.
Those are the maps we were talking about earlier that are developed with the engineering. So and every community who has floods or has these firms, and the pre-firm and the post-firm, if you look at properties that were developed under older rules, that is where over 90% of all the flood rehab and remediation and assistance money goes to, as compared to properties that were constructed what they call post-firm or after the flood insurance rate maps were done. Very little money, less than 10% of the federal government's money goes to those properties.
Really? So
Yeah.
the newer construction and newer engineering doesn't get damaged as much, as
Right.
often.
As often.
Yeah,
as
no, it's
often.
nationally, it's pretty startling when you start looking into the data. Yeah.
Wow.
Just, and it's in their defense. I mean, locally, we struggle with it because there's nobody wants to tell us what to do with our property, and I'm the same way.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it really has demonstrated to work in terms of helping to save people a lot of money long term.
Mm-hmm.
If your property never gets flooded, you really don't think about it. But
Mm-hmm.
it's a very expensive, flooding is the most expensive natural risk hazard that we have.
Oh, really? Even more than fire?
Yeah, now fire covers a lot more territory in terms of
Mhm.
acreage. But if you're talking about just sheer dollars that go to emergencies and rehabbing and reconstructing damaged property, flooding, because water is, I mean, fire is too, of course, but
Yeah.
but you just have far more properties that are affected by flooding nationally than you do fire.
Mhm. And in some ways, is it possible that fire damage is somewhat easier to clean up than flood because of the moisture and the potential for mold and the sewage and all that?
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
trying to discount fire. Fire is catastrophic as well.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
as you're talking, I'm just thinking, well, yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
Only half your house is damaged by a flood. You still have water damage pretty much everywhere.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So, what are some of the typical questions that you guys get from homeowners when they come in and they're wanting to do something on their riverfront properties?
Well, a lot of it has to do with, can I put a shed here, or can I add on to my house?
Oh,
Or
gotcha.
yeah, they may want to add an addition onto their house or add a garage.
Mm-hmm.
Also about what they can do about the vegetation close to their house and the floodway. A lot of people don't realize that willows, they look kind of like weeds, but they're tall and stringy and they don't have leaves, but it's a really important habitat within the river, for both. It's important for nesting birds. It's
Mm-hmm.
also important to slow the water for juvenile fish that live in the river, as well as we have We have western pond turtles in the river and
Oh,
they,
I didn't know that.
yeah, I've seen them. So they need a slower backwater kind of area, and the willows provide that kind of slowing of the water.
Uh-huh.
So they ask about vegetation removal, new construction. Some people on the river want to make a path down. We had one homeowner who wanted to replace a boat ramp that was there by a previous owner, but I guess the flows aren't what they used to be. And so he did have to go through the full engineering, no rise analysis, even though it's concrete on the bottom. Had to get sign off from the city engineer, submit engineer drawings, and he was able to do it. Now, we don't
Oh,
have any docks any legal docks within the Rogue River.
you do not?
No, if you do an aerial flyover within the city, you won't see a wooden dock out there.
Okay.
Think about it, they're not there.
Mhm.
So people have to use the public boat ramps to get their boats in and out.
Mhm.
Some people, like I say, do have those concrete old boat ramps that go
Yeah,
down
we
the
see
river.
those sometimes.
Yeah, but you don't see a wooden dock if you think about it.
Huh.
Floating out there. If they're there, they didn't get permission. Okay, I'll just say that.
So what happens if, you put one in illegally? Like, what are the consequences?
You have to remove it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are there any fines
yeah.
or penalties?
Well,
No jail time?
Yeah, no jail time, no handcuffs. Yeah. I mean, enforcement's a funny thing. Each jurisdiction kind of has their own approach to it, and of course the state of Oregon gets involved too, because as we talked about
Because
earlier.
their water.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I would say my experience in Oregon is that for the most part, you start out with the friendly approach and just let people know, hey, this is installed without permits and illegally, and we
Yeah.
usually give people a designated period of time by which they can remove it, and then we check back, and if it's still there, then we take it to the next level, which is often turning it into the attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there could be fines if it goes far enough.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And is that a code enforcement process mostly?
Yeah.
Right.
Uh-huh. Okay. So that'd be done through the city code enforcement people?
Yeah, and often in tandem with Department of State Lands or
Uh-huh.
ODFW, depending on what the situation is.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've got lots more questions to ask, and we're running up against another break. We're
Okay.
talking to Bradley Clark and Community Development Management, and Donna Rupp, Associate Planner, City of Grants Pass. We're talking about water and floods and docks and enjoying your riverfront property without causing a hullabaloo down at City Hall. They also have a fabulous website. We're going to talk about that next. So let's talk about the website, folks. Great website, City of Grants Pass. The website address is grantspassoregon.gov. That's grantspassoregon.gov. grantspassoregon.gov, all spelled out. And you can click onto the different departments and go into the Community Development Planning Division, and you'll see a little spot there on the left for flood management. It's very robust, very easy to understand, and has a lot of history in it too. We had quite a big flood in the 60s, and it talks more about that. So feel free to click on grantspassoregon.gov. We just have to take a quick word from our sponsors, John L. Scott, Ashland and Medford, Guy Giles, Mutual of Omaha, and our local Rogue Valley Association of Realtors. Do not touch that dial. Well, welcome back to the Real Estate Show, everybody. We're talking to Brad Clark and Donna Rupp of the City of Grants Pass. Just a reminder, this episode will air again tomorrow, Sunday at 8 a.m. on this station, the ACE 1300 AM. So if you want to review everything Brad and Donna said, I encourage you to catch it at 8 a.m. tomorrow, Sunday. So this is our last segment, Brad and Donna. We've got a lot to talk about. Donna, why don't you kick us off?
Okay, I just wanted to remind people, both homeowners and renters, that there are some things that they can do around their property to lessen the damage from flooding if it were to happen.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so one thing that's really important that people get caught up in after natural disasters is, where are their important papers? You
Oh,
know,
good point.
yeah, and so what the recommendation is to store them either off-site, if you have a safe deposit box at the bank or something like that, or in the cloud somewhere. So store them electronically where you can access them from anywhere if you happen to be displaced from your property.
That's probably best for your insurance papers, right?
Yeah, your insurance, your mortgage, your credit card statements,
Oh, good point.
bills, because if they get washed away and you're like, well, I don't know what my account number is, or, it applies to all natural disasters, but it's a really great backup plan to have, as well as your information if you have pets,
Oh, yeah.
like photos for your pets and your vet records. Those things are really important. Also, to have a family meeting to discuss what everyone should do in case of flooding, where to meet, who to call, what your safety precautions are. Especially Grants Pass, we're divided by the river. So if there were some natural disaster and say your house is on the south side of the river and you work on the north side of the river, like I do, what do you do? How do you get home? Who do you call if you
Or
can't?
kids' schools.
Right, exactly. Schools, children. And protect the creeks and rivers around your house by never dumping chemicals, debris, or hazardous materials near them. I know most people don't do that anymore, but it's just a good reminder, especially like if you have a garden shed and you put your can of gasoline in there for your lawnmower, put it up on a shelf, or in the winter, move it into a higher place.
That's very good advice.
Yeah, it's just those kind of things that you normally don't think of, but if floodwaters come in and wash that downstream, you're causing a lot of pollution and damage to the environment. And you can improve drainage on your property by keeping the ditches in front of the house cleared out. If you need to, you can put in French drains and talk to a contractor about how to move water away from your house. Also, a really important point is that flooding is not covered by your typical homeowners or renters insurance. It is not written in there anywhere. So if you say, oh, I have home insurance, well, not for flooding. That's a separate policy. And the best thing to do is ask your insurance agent to help you find a flood policy. You don't even have to own the home. You don't have to be in a special flood hazard area. If you're concerned about flooding, you can buy a flood insurance policy. And it's really important.
There's about, I believe last count was about 20 to 22 insurance companies in Oregon who offer flood insurance. So
that doesn't seem like very many.
Not a lot.
Yeah, no, and it's become less over the years, I think, but.
And the one thing that the city does to lower the cost of flood insurance for residents of Grants Pass is we participate in a program that's called the CRS program, which is the community rating system, where the city actually institutes different policies to safeguard properties against flooding. And so the rating system that we're in now, it saves people approximately $90 a year on the insurance premium because of what the city has implemented to prevent flood damage.
Mhm.
So we are concerned. We don't have a whole lot of policy holders within the city, but we are doing what we can to help them get a better rate on their flood insurance.
Oh, that's awesome. So we just kind of need to get the word out about that because there's just not enough homeowners and renters are aware of all these things, which is why we're so happy to have you on the show today.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, if I could just underscore the Donna's first point about, you know, things that are stored down kind of near the water. If you look historically at what is it that really causes the most damage, and you look at like some historic floods from like in the 60s, late 60s was some of our worst, and you find a historic photo at the historic museum or something, and you zoom into like a bridge where the abutments are, or you know some other where the river narrows, and you start to see this buildup of you know debris and logs and lawn chairs and
Sheds.
you know different pieces of playground equipment that all kind of get jammed up, and then the water, you know, the flooding happens even more so.
Yeah.
So it's just you know another point for folks to keep in mind, and it's not that you can't have those things down there, but maybe when you're done having a fun afternoon, you know, bring them up closer to the house rather than keeping all these loose things, you know, down close to the water.
And even in Grants Pass, you know, we have very dry summers. So we don't see flooding in the summer months.
Right.
And so it's like, say after Labor Day, you know, bring all your loose stuff up from the riverbank and put it up away from the river. So
I love that idea. It's
Yeah.
almost make that part of your winterization
There you go.
exactly.
calendar, make that part of your routine. And gosh, I think a lot of us just never thought of this.
Yeah.
But your lawn chairs, your playground equipment,
Your picnic tables.
because
Yeah.
when those get caught by something, they catch all kinds of other things floating downstream.
And they increase flooding.
And it
Because they're-
changes the direction. And
Yes.
you know, you guys in the state of Oregon have studied all these riverbanks, and you're prepared for the water to go a certain way. So somebody's swing set can make it go somewhere else that we weren't prepared for.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's just a fascinating science. We only have about 3 minutes left. Can we talk more about your website? Because it is so robust. There's so much information. And also how people can get a hold of you by phone, because you guys are great about answering.
Well, thank you. We try.
Yeah.
So our website is grantspassoregon.gov, and that's all spelled out. And if you just go to the search bar and search flood management, you'll bring up our page that has all sorts of information and links in it. You, of course, can call the Community Development Department if you have questions about floodways. You will be connected to me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that line to the Community Development Department is 541-450-6060. And then just ask to speak to somebody about if you have questions about flooding or you own property in a floodway.
Or you're thinking of buying
Or
property on the
yes.
water. Let's get in front of it, folks.
Yeah, you know, and there's no reason why people shouldn't know. And I get a little annoyed that realtors, when it says floodplain and they just say don't know, unknown. Well, it's just like 3 clicks away to an interactive map to find out if that property is in a floodway.
Yep. And everything in Southern Oregon is near water somehow.
Right. Well, up in the mountains, maybe not, but yeah, it's pretty accurate.
Yeah. So we only have a minute left, and I just wanted to ask, how do you know we're having a year that might flood? Or do we just need to have you back?
Well, the USGS, United States Geological Survey, they have river gauges, and they have a very robust website, and they have a river gauge in Grants Pass on the Road River, and they also, they go all the way upriver to the reservoir, the Lost Lake Reservoir, and all the way down.
We're going to talk more about that next time. I'm thinking
Okay.
before, right when summer's over, we'll have you guys back and we'll start getting homeowners and renters get their waterways ready for the winter. What do you think? Can we do that?
Sounds good.
Thumbs up.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks so much, Brad and Donna of the city of Grants Pass. That was awesome. Great information.
All right. Thank you.
Anytime. Thanks, Alice.
All right. Southern Oregon, make it a great week. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. Bye now.
Thank you.